Mars has been in the news lately because of the NASA's earth-shattering statement that there's actually flowing water under the dry, red, rusty sands of Mars. I don't need to repeat what's already been said about that, the agenda at play, the climate change, the ancient aliens. How eventually they'll be telling us that we need to evacuate to Mars because Earth is dying. For NASA, Mars holds a lot of secrets, and NASA constantly lies about everything about Mars. Mars is, of course, the Roman god of war in ancient times, but in modern times it's the father of all spacefaring lies. And the biggest mountain of NASA bullshit in the solar system happens to be on the red planet. That's why this whole water on Mars thing is a great opportunity for me. I've been wanting to talk about this very strange planet for a long time. Let's talk about the elephant in the room of lies that NASA tells. NASA designates this, the largest mountain in the solar system, as a shield volcano here on Earth. And actually, when you look into what a shield volcano is, the absurdity of NASA will erupt within you. Wikipedia describes it thusly. A shield volcano is a type of volcano usually built almost entirely of fluid magma flows. They are named for their large size and low profile, resembling a warrior's shield lying on the ground. This is caused by the highly fluid lava they erupt, which travels farther than lava erupts from stratovolcanoes. This results in the steady accumulation of broad sheets of lava building up the shield volcano's distinctive form. And so, shield volcanoes are low. They're not stratovolcanoes that are really tall mountains, right? They're very low, often compared to a large pancake. But this one on Mars is literally 16 or 17 miles tall. And there's nothing like it on Earth, but the NASA's try to pass this gargantuan Martian feature off as a lowly shield volcano, when in fact, if it was on Earth, it would actually reach the stratosphere in sheer height. Here's a sample of bullshit that NASA spews or makes mainstream Wikipedia, so us parrot earthlings can blindly repeat and post whatever the NASA's dictate. Olympus Mons is a very large shield volcano on the planet Mars. By one measure, it has a height of nearly 25 kilometers, 16 miles. Olympus Mons stands almost 3 times as tall as Mount Everest's height above sea level. It is the youngest of the large volcanoes on Mars, having formed during Mars' Amazonian period. Amazonian period. It is currently the largest volcano discovered in the solar system and had been known to astronomers since the late 19th century as the albedo feature, Nix Olympica, Latin for Olympic snow. Its mountainous nature was suspected well before space probes confirmed its identity as a mountain. As a shield volcano, Olympus Mons resembles in its morphology the large volcanoes making up the Hawaiian Islands, yet scaled down about 20 times, right? It doesn't resemble that at all. The edifice is about 600 kilometers wide, about the size of the state of Arizona, as they love to say. Allocating a height to the structure is difficult. It stands 21 kilometers above the Mars global datum, and its local relief from the foot of the cliffs, which form its margin, into the northwest to its peak is nearly 22 kilometers. There's a 22 kilometer sheer cliff leading up to this mountain, a little over twice the height of Mauna Kea as measured from its base on the ocean floor. That's the volcano I showed you earlier. Okay, this is their brainless attempt at explaining why this thing exists. Olympus Mons is the result of many thousands of highly fluid basaltic lava flows that poured from volcanic vents over a long period of time. The Hawaiian Islands exemplify similar shield volcanoes on a smaller scale, on a much smaller scale. And we got to remember that Mars is 1/3 the size of Earth. So if you put it in the context of Earth, you would have to make it 3 times as large on Earth. So that would be, it's 16 miles high. So on Earth, to use it to scale of the Earth, it would be almost 50 miles high. It would reach almost into space on Earth. The flanks of Olympus Mons are made up of innumerable lava flows and lava channels. There's absolutely no proof of this. Many of the flows have levees along their margins. Levees are parallel ridges formed at the edges of lava flows. The cooler outer margins of the flow solidify, leaving a central tuft of molten flowing lava. Partially collapsed lava tubes are visible as chains of pit craters. And blah blah blah. They're trying to equate this with the geology of Earth again, when in actuality, think about it. Like I said, scaled up to the Earth's size, 3 times larger than it is on Mars, it would rise up just below the end of the Earth's atmosphere. There isn't enough magma in the Earth to create a ridiculous structure like this. But NASA insists that this is how it happened. They start off with one lie and pile another lie on top of that and another lie on top of that until you have the biggest pile of bullshit in the solar system. Let's look at a more logical explanation for how this thing was. They have to do it this way because NASA has to back up the whole religion of evolution and the Big Bang, and the idea that changes in the solar system happen over millions and even billions of years, like they say it is with how the largest volcano in the solar system formed. I like the electric universe approach. I find their explanation for some of the geological formations on Mars a tad more scientific, a lot more elegant in their simplicity. NASA is a big clumsy outfit that has to go with the big religion known as evolution, where planets evolve over millions and billions of years. Nothing happens suddenly, as in the Great Flood in Genesis, or many of the mythologies documented before the Bible. And incidentally, this is how the Electric Universe, or the Thunderbolts Project, was inspired, through the ideas of Dr. Immanuel Velikovsky. It was poo-pooed and lambasted by Carl Sagan, the voice of America, the voice of the nassholes, Dr. Turtleneck. In spite of the idea that NASA names all of its newfound heavenly bodies and spaceships and rovers after mythological gods, they never tire of implying that the ancient mythologies were written by fanciful mystics who must have been mistaken. But Dr. Velikovsky took them seriously and did some extensive investigation into the idea of what he called catastrophism, which is to say that huge sudden changes have been visited on not only the Earth but the entire solar system, such as the Great Flood in the Bible, which NASA will deny categorically. And Dr. Velikovsky investigated this whole flood myth, which transcends into virtually every ancient society on Earth. So therefore it must have happened. The Bible describes the water rising 7 cubits over the tallest mountain on Earth. And before this happened, ancient Hebrew documents describe Saturn blowing up into the brightness of 1,000 suns. And there's evidence on Earth here to suggest that salt water on this planet is a subsequent phenomenon after the flood, due to the fact that 70% of the Earth's fresh water is locked up in the ancient ice of Antarctica, not to mention the many Martian meteorites they found on that continent, accompanied of course with the usual pseudoscience explanation for how they got there, when the simplest explanation is that Mars was actually very close to Earth at one time. or actually even maybe collided with Earth's atmosphere. Other Christian writers have proposed such a outlandish proposition, such as Donald Patton, who wrote the biblical Flood and Ice Age epic, where he posited that perhaps the water from the Great Flood actually spilled onto our planet from the deep basins of Mars. In Genesis 7:11, we read the fountains of the great deep broken up and the windows of heaven were opened. And then in Genesis 8:2, we read the fountains also of the deep and the windows of heaven were stopped and the rain from heaven was restrained. So the Bible's implying that all this water from the great flood that filled the earth to the rafters with water came from outer space. So at the time of this supposed Saturnian system, I assume Mount Olympus on Mars, or Olympus Mons, was actually facing Saturn close enough so the two planets were arcing a constant electrical discharge at each other, as David Talbot of the Electric Universe so elegantly explains.
Olympus Mons itself has all the characteristics of a lightning blister. Such raised, bell-shaped blisters can be found on the caps of lightning arresters after a cloud-to-ground strike. And we find them in other natural settings as well. They are elevated fulgurites, what some have called fulgamites. The discharge that creates a raised fulgurite is often followed by lesser strokes along the same ionized path, creating overlapping pits on the top of the formation, just like the circular craters on the summit of Olympus Mons. On the Martian mountain, the smaller craters center on the walls of the larger and are cut to greater depths, as if with a cookie cutter. The material that forms the raised fulgurite is scavenged from the surrounding surface. The result is an encircling depression or moat. This characteristic is so clear and obvious as to raise a critical question. Is there a moat around the base of Olympus Mons? Planetary scientists say there is a moat, but that its remains are only slightly visible to the west, and the rest of the moat has been buried by later deposits of material whose origin is still debated. They explain the moat as the effect of Olympus Mons sinking into the local terrain over long spans of time. But is another explanation possible? The features of Olympus Mons are, in fact, a perfect fit to an electrical interpretation, down to numerous details. Several years ago, Wal Thornhill conducted a laboratory experiment to demonstrate the effect of an electric arc on a positively charged, or anode, clay surface. At moderate power, the electric arc raised a circular mound from the surrounding material to create both a moat and an encircling fluid aureole extracted from the clay, while also carving a crater on the top of the mound and cutting pits and gouges in its flanks. As the power was increased, the arc briefly stopped moving and burnt a smaller circular crater within the pre-existing crater, leaving a glowing spot.
I don't know, I have a lot of problems with the Saturn myth in terms of how Saturn supposedly blew up and all the planets around it blew away from it, and Earth headed towards the sun and ended up in the Goldilocks zone with the moon, which a lot of scientists say it shouldn't be there. It defies all scientific explanation. But you got to admit, the Electric Universe's proposition of how Olympus Mons came to be is a hell of a lot more elegant than the nasshole's clumsy interpretation. With them, everything in the universe, including God's most prized creation, us, was all put together by random chance of evolution instead of the intelligent design, which seems much more evident than the nasshole's version of creation.